You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits. A podcast that encourages you to love more in your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, my major is communication, and I'm from Lansing, Michigan. If you've ever had a conversation on a college campus, you know that is the typical way in which conversations go. And when you graduate to adulthood, your major becomes the work that you do. So here's the thing. I love communication and I love friendships, but making friends can be hard, and initiating conversations and maintaining small talk can be the absolute worst. So what do we do? In this episode, we'll explore conversations, as that might be the first step in making new friends, and perhaps working on our conversational skills can also help us navigate chit-chat with nearly everyone, but also the people we're actually interested in talking to more. So we're in the second week of classes here at Central Michigan University, and in that time I've first initiated and interacted in conversations with new folks and people I already know. Second, we've talked about communication, including those habitual conversations we have every day in several of my classes. And third, I've witnessed students having conversations that seem to focus on get to know you business and making future plans. So let's say the new school year has inspired me to focus on how to have conversations when meeting new folks and making new friends. So let's start with those everyday habitual conversations. Now, one of our communication scholars who is really well known, Dr. Steve Duck, he is quoted as saying, quote, "Talk is an everyday activity, and it's what we do the most in all of our relationships," end quote. And so if you think about your friends and your family and your romantic partners and in the workplace, that most of what you do is talking. But we first need to have conversations with new people to build new relationships. And politeness doesn't help. What do our daily conversations sound like? Perhaps something like this. "Hi, how are you?" "Great. How are you doing?" "Doing well, thanks." Oh, wow. But are we great? Are we doing well? See, politeness can guide us through these conversations, but typically we're not very honest, and it doesn't allow us for having openness or building off what other people say. But let's be real. Sometimes we're just like, oh, thank God for those habitual conversations. I don't know what to say. Or that's the extent in which I would like to speak to that person is the, "Hey, how you doing? Okay, cool. Have a good day. Bye." Right? Sometimes it's, that's all it is. But when there are people we do want to get to know more, how can we go beyond the, "How are you?" So I follow the Gottman Institute on Facebook, and the Gottman Institute is based on the research and work of John Gottman. And according to that Facebook page, quote, "It is our mission to reach out to families in order to help create and maintain greater love and health in relationships. We are committed to an ongoing program of research that increases the understanding of relationships and adds to the development of interventions that have been carefully evaluated. It is our goal to make our services accessible to the broadest reach of people across race, religion, class, culture, sexual orientation, and ethnicity." So on this page was posted a photo from the Instagram account Sit With Wit. So that's the @ SITWITHWHIT. And so it is an image, and it says questions you can ask instead of "How are you?" Now, the Gottman Institute and this particular image is going to focus on those relationships that Steve Duck was talking about, ones that we already have. And so this might be helpful with kids at the end of the day when, yes, "How was school?" And they're like, "Fine." Right? It's the same conversation. Or you talk to your partner, or you're talking to roommates or friends. But I also think it really encourages the idea that we go beyond those habitual conversations. We get beyond the "this is what we have to do," or "this is just what I know," and actually get to know people through the questions that we ask. And that may be people more likely to stop and open up or connect because they've been asked questions they haven't been asked before. So here are some questions from this image that I found on the Facebook page. It says, What is something interesting that happened today? What made you smile today? What would you like to be different tomorrow? What are you most excited for this week? What do you wish you did more of today? So there's lots of different questions. You can imagine that going up to someone that you don't know and saying, "Is there anything you want to talk about from your day might not go over well, but that might go over well or better with someone that you live with or you know. But again, I think this is the idea that let's go beyond the how are you. And I do think there's some questions in there. And some of the things that I do, I have a Facebook group for Best Forevers. It's Best Forevers Pod. Go ahead and join because I think we have a good interaction. We post stories and memes and different things about friendship and have discussions and things like that. But one of the things that I do is, what are you doing today? What's going on Saturday? GIF me, right? And so it's like, okay, well, that's one question I can ask. I can ask lots of questions, and it doesn't have to just be like something that we hear 73 times every single day. How are you? Fine. Cool. See ya. Bye. Right? So maybe we can talk to people in a more meaningful and proactive way, in a way that's thoughtful and not just, hi. But I know you're probably thinking, hey, I got topics to discuss. My concern is how you get in there. And so let's go ahead and talk about the 3 parts of a conversation. And this is some of the content that I discuss in class. And I'll be citing things in here, but then I'll also have citations in my show notes. So the very first thing that you need to know is that before you can even have a conversation or we can talk about the 3 parts of the conversation is that you have to put yourself out there socially. So this might, these conversations might work in the workplace or if you go to a meetup of something that you're interested in. But the idea is that you need to put yourself in a situation where you can interact with other people. And I think that's really important. So it might be like, okay, one of the questions that we just talked about, what are you most excited about for this week? So maybe one of the things that you can do is on Sundays or Mondays, you can plan somewhere or something that you're going to do for the upcoming week or weeks. So you have something that you are socially doing that's integrated with all the other things that you have to do or you want to do. And so maybe that's something like going to, I live in a university town, so going to a sporting event. So, the field hockey team is playing. I'm going to go check that out. And those take place outside and people gather. And so that might be a way to socially interact with another person. So again, you got to put yourself out there socially. So when I talk about conversations in the classroom, and I do this because I think it's important and not to assume that even my students in communication or people who are skilled in communication know how to have conversations. And I think that we could all improve in this area because, again, the habitual stuff gets us. We just sort of barge into people's worlds and want their attention at that moment. We interrupt. We don't know how to get out of a conversation that this might just be something that we don't specifically talk about on a regular basis, which I was like, I think this is a great topic for a podcast episode. So there are 3 parts to a conversation. You have the beginning part, you have the middle or maintaining the conversation part, and that's where the bulk of everything happens. And then you have the concluding part, which is how you leave or end a conversation. And I think that most people have difficulty starting the conversation, and then a lot of times it's like, how do I get out of this? I would like this to end. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the beginning of a conversation. So typically here, much like you have to put yourself out there socially, that when you go to said field hockey game, for example, you would have to show non-verbally and verbally that you are available and willing to talk. So if you're sitting in the corner, not making eye contact with anyone, and you have your arms crossed, across your chest, then that's probably going to be a signal like, not interested. Or typically people will have headphones in, and I'm sure that there are many of us who have headphones in to signal to people that we do not want to talk when we don't even have our headphones on. Some people are probably listening to podcasts or music and are multitasking or just don't want to be bothered. That's like going to a coffee shop. You're putting yourself out there socially. But if someone is reading a book and has headphones on, then that might be not the like, hey, can we chat for a minute? And, speaking of, I saw this thread on Twitter, and it was from someone who writes articles about I think it's the modern man. I think that's what it is. And so it was an entire article about how to get a woman's attention when she has headphones in. And it was written in a way that was like, the headphones shouldn't stop you. You wave and tell them to take their headphones off, and they will be happy and flattered that you want to talk to them. And I was like, most people I know, no matter the gender, when they have headphones in, they don't want to be bothered. So to me, that didn't seem like very good advice. Like, now, if it's an emergency situation or it's someone there are exceptions and things that are fine. Waving at people. And even sometimes if you're going for a walk, like I took my new dog Finnegan for a walk last night, and there was a woman coming towards us, and she had headphones in, and she took them out as she passed so that she could say hello and we could have a brief conversation. And I was like, that's pretty cool. That was her saying, I'm willing to say, like, hey, it doesn't mean we stop and we became best friends, but again, it gets at that showing availability and your willingness to have a conversation with another human being, right? So again, a lot of times, don't be surprised that people are mad when you ask them to take their headphones off to chit chat and start a new conversation. So it's kind of like, yeah, no, thank you. The next thing that you do is you have an opening, which is a greeting, and that is simply hello. And that might be you're about to say, how are you, aren't you? And those things are common. They go unnoticed. And one of the things is sometimes with greetings, especially when it's a group, we can make the mistake of not introducing everyone and that sort of thing. But a lot of times, with openings, you want to be sure that you include everyone, or, it's just like, hi, I'm Alysa. What's going on here? Who are you? At school, sometimes I'll be like, hey, I'm Dr. Lucas. I don't know you yet. Tell me your name. And I'll do that with students. And it's a little bold, but, a lot of times people laugh. They're like, yeah, no, we don't know each other, or I've heard about you, or, I follow you on Twitter, and then we can start a conversation in that sense. They'll be like, oh, I'm JoJo, or whatever their name is. And then it'll be like, are you a comm major? And they're like, yeah. And so an opening doesn't always have to be something that's planned to a T, and it doesn't have to be something that's super complicated. And it's like, hey, I noticed you're drinking, what is that, pumpkin spice latte? I too like pumpkin spice latte. We should chat. Like, whoa, no. Like, that's too much. And all this is also going to, when we talk about pickup lines in a romantic sense, when you're trying to talk to someone that you find attractive, and people come up with all these things like, hey, you must be tired. Why do you say that? Because you've been running around in my dreams all night. I don't know, like, just some of them are great. And it's like, what is it? Do you know how much a polar bear weighs? No, why? I was just trying to break the ice. Like, I think I might have got that wrong. See, that's the issue with having things so planned like that you say them wrong and they might not make sense. And in some cases, people might not take those seriously, or it might just be too much. It's too complicated. And so I ask my students, when you meet someone new, why don't you just say, hi, my name is Alysa. What's your name? It's so easy. And then if you're at a party, you're like, and it's a married couple, or it's a set of roommates, it's like, how do you know Johnny? I'm just making up names today, man. How do you know Johnny? Oh, I went to high school with him. Oh, you did? I met him when in high school at a job, but we didn't know we didn't go to the same high school. And you can start talking about knowing Johnny in high school, right? But I might be getting a little ahead of myself, because the beginning of the conversation doesn't get into all of that, and we'll talk about topics and things like that in just a minute. But the idea is we just want to come up with some ways to start a conversation with people. It doesn't have to be a ruse like, hey, do you have the time? Now that I'm here, my name is Alysa, right? Sometimes if that helps you get into a situation, I guess that's fine. you might want to say, if that helps me get used to having these conversations, Alysa, that's what I'm going to do. And I'll say, you know what? I appreciate that. Even though I study communication, do not enjoy starting conversations. So I get it. But maybe moving towards OA, coming up with you can have some opening lines, say, to have in your pocket that you're ready to do. But again, it might not be something that's so rehearsed, right? My name is Alysa, what's yours? Or what are you up to do today? Sometimes when you get into a coffee shop and you both sit next to each other or something, you're like, hey, good morning. Oh, are you studying today? Yeah, me too. Those sorts of things. Or I see you're reading Harry Potter. What book are you on? Or is this your first time reading the series? Like, it's just like thinking about making note of what people are doing, but not in a very planned way, but still plan for yourself, if that makes you feel better. So one thing that I love about conversations, that when people do it, it just makes them the best, especially when you're in the workplace. So even if this doesn't work for how to start conversations with friends, I think this is just good information to have. And this is something that I'm like, always want to tell my students. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, one of the things is going into a conversation can be difficult, but think about it this way. Like, if a student is walking into a professor's office hours, there's a power difference. They're going into a space they might not be familiar with. They might not be sure how the other person's going to respond. And so feed forwards helps going into these sort of difficult or awkward situations. So a feed forward is when you let the person know what you need from them and how long it's going to take. That way, when you're on the end of entering someone's space and you use a feed forward, you can determine whether or not they have time for the conversation at this point. And that might be helpful if you see someone at the coffee shop. I see that it looks like you'll be studying today, but I was just wondering what you think about this book that you have here. Do you have time to talk about that for a couple minutes? That's a feed forward. So feed forward is letting people know what you need from them. And then they can determine if they have the time and the capacity to have that conversation. So, for example, if a student wants to come into my office hours, one of the examples that I give when I'm in class is you knock on the door and you're like, hi, Dr. Lucas, I'm JoJo from your theory class, and I was wondering if you had 5 minutes to answer a question about the latest quiz. And I could be like, hey, JoJo, yeah, come on in. I recognize you from my class, and I would love to help you with your quiz. And, I have more than enough time to help you. And then it makes them feel better about coming into the space and knowing that they're not being a nuisance or bothering. And I always tell students, if my door's open, you can come in. But that doesn't mean people might not feel bad about entering your space or wondering if you're being disruptive to them. And a feed forward is a great way to, first, if you're the person entering the space, you can determine if that person has time, and they can let you know if they do or not, versus just going in and sitting down and start talking to them when they're like, I am about to go teach, so I don't have time right now. And then it also allows the person that the space you've entered to make you feel comfortable, or to let you know, like, this won't work right now, but I have enough time to schedule another time to talk to you. And I know you're thinking, well, that's a little bit more formal. Oh, it works in the workplace, but it can even work with friends. Like, oh gosh, I've had such a bad day. I need to talk. Do you have like 20 minutes or so? I just need to get this off my chest. And someone can say, yeah, let's talk while I make dinner. And then you can stay and eat dinner, and then I have to study, or I have whatever it is that you might have. And so it's a great way to set up a specific time, and it might be right then to have the conversation, and it works for everyone. The person wanting to talk feels more comfortable. The person who you want to talk with is willing to be like, yes, I have the time, or I don't have the time. So I really enjoy feed forward. And so one of the things is that could work in a new conversation. Just like I said, it looks like you're about to study, but I was wondering if I could ask you about X or something like that. Do you have a moment? And then they can say yes, or they can say no. Okay. Then when you are initiating and beginning the conversation, that's when you can introduce yourself and ask questions that will engage others. the environment and the other person. And so, it could be like, oh, they could say, yeah, I have a moment. And they could be like, so I've had that book on my reading list for a while, and I tried to start reading it twice. Can you tell me, have you finished it? What do you think about it? Like, you can start asking a question, and that can lead into their response. You can listen to what they say, that you can build upon it. You can ask questions. And then in that sense, the conversation might continue. In some cases, it might not. And you could say, hey, thanks for your time. You just had a connection with someone and interacted with someone you didn't know. And that's building towards building relationships and friendships specifically. And who knows, if you can continue to go to, say, a coffee shop where that person might be studying and reading, you might be able to pick up those conversations, right? And in some cases, if they have their headphones on and they're like, yeah, I'm about halfway through, it's okay so far. And then they're like, so good luck with the reading, and they put their headphones on, that would indicate to you that they don't have time to have that conversation. Doesn't mean they don't want to talk to you per se. It might mean, yeah, they don't want to talk to anyone. They might have to study. Like me, I go to the local coffee shop because my internet doesn't work sometimes. And so it's one of those things like I want to use the internet and get in when I need to do and get out. So sometimes it's the situation. But the point is that you got out there, you try to have that conversation, you did have that conversation, or you found out that was not the time for the conversation. And again, the more experience you have, the easier these conversations can become, as long as the person you're having a conversation with is... One of the things is it can be difficult because there are some people it can be very difficult to have a conversation with, like awkwardness, being shy. There's lots of things, and there's nothing wrong with all those things, but generally, the more you do this, the better it gets, right? Or the easier it becomes. Or you might even say, this person is difficult to have a conversation with. You might know from having all these conversations, it's time to get out. This is an early escape route. Where's the exit? Abort, abort, abort. Typically, people start with small talk. And gosh, is this not the worst thing ever? I mean, I study communication. I love communication. I teach it. This podcast is mainly about communication and friendship. But small talk conversation can just be really awkward. And a lot of it is like the habitual conversations that we have. It just is simply there to meet social needs or to not come across rude. And in some cases, that's where we might start to have a conversation we can build if the small talk can go somewhere and it can be interesting. And so typically when we do small talk, we refer to our specific surroundings, right? The environment we're in. So a lot of times, the elevator or we talk about the fact that it is snowing outside, or that it was 90 last week and now it's, 60 this week. Like, we do things that are really safe and easy to talk about that we're all experiencing. So in Michigan, this might be how the elevator ride goes. Thanks for holding the elevator. Oh man, it is cold out there today. And I think it's supposed to rain. And then later I think it's supposed to hail. And then someone will go, hey, it's Michigan. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. Chugga, chugga, chugga. Sorry, right? Those conversations that we have, but that is a safe place to start. I'm making fun of it slightly because it is habitual, like the how are you? And we do have classic cliches and jokes and things like that from wherever we might be from, the state, the city, the university, the workplace, the whatever, right? And so we can usually refer to the space we're in like, oh gosh, it was really cold outside, but this room is really warm. So, hope my teacher's interesting today because I'm ready for a nap. There's lots of things you can do. So that's the first thing, your immediate surroundings and sort of what we call the physical context. So whether the room or space you're in. Then you can refer to other thoughts and feelings. And if you're at a party, you could say, oh gosh, don't you just, I'm thinking of college students right now. Oh gosh, don't you just love college parties? Aren't they better than high school parties? But it could be like, at a workplace happy hour. Oh gosh, aren't you so glad this week is over? It's been really busy at work. Yeah, or has it been busy in your department? It's been so busy in mine, right? So it's just like how you're feeling, what your opinions are, and if you're around food and you're like, hey, have you tried this? Oh my God, this is the best artichoke dip I've ever had. So if you're into artichoke dip, try that out. Do you like artichoke dip? Right? So there's lots of things that you can do about, you can still build off the immediate surroundings and then talk about the things that you like. And typically people stick with that because they might not start complaining right away, right? Because most often we like positivity. And if we're trying to build friendships, we're trying to stay positive. And so we might wait to get into the negative. And so, like basic complaining like this weather, but if you're complaining about everything, it might be viewed as negative. So that's something to keep in mind. You can refer to the person. So if you're at a work function or you're at a party or some social setting, like, hey, I feel like I've seen you around, but I've never met you before. Hi, my name is Alysa. What's yours? Right? Are you friends with so-and-so? Do you know blah, blah, whoever's hosting the party? Or do you know someone on the field hockey team? Do you come to the field hockey games often? You can just start talking about who they are, referring to them, asking them questions specifically. And, some of the small talk topics, you can, like I said, immediate surroundings and weather, your thoughts and opinions. Typically people talk about major, what you do, what's your job. But one of the things is that not everyone might be in college. Not everyone might have a job. People get laid off. People work from home. People are stay-at-home mothers, stay-at-home fathers. And so one of the questions that you can ask, instead of just being like, so what do you do? And this happened to me several years ago. I met one of my friend's friends and I said, oh, what do you do? She's like, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I said, oh, tell me about your kids, and I showed interest and she told me, and then she's like, do you have any kids? And I said, no. I said, but the closest thing I have, I guess, is my cat Rooney. But I was like, and then I referred to something with my nephew and I asked her a question and then she kind of turned away and was like, not interested. And I was like, So it's fine. Okay, I know a cat is not a child, but I did try to go and make a connection with my nephew and what I know about kids. So one of the things might have been better is, how do you spend your time? And then they might have brought up being a stay-at-home mom, or they could have brought up, some of the hobbies they do, or maybe they have a side hustle or something. There's other things. Let them decide how they spend their time and what they share with you. And then there might not get into some awkward conversations. And I think that's just something to think about. I think most people say, they might know that question is going to be asked of them and they might have something prepared like, oh, I'm between jobs right now, but, I really like these kind of jobs, and they might build into it. But just in case, you could just ask people, how do you spend your time? So then it's current events, movies, sports, things like that are typically safe. Current events, we're living a real hot and saucy time now. There's so much going on that current events that can get pretty particular, because usually with small talk and when you meet new people, you stay away from talking about religious topics, money, like how much people make, and politics, right? And so that can be something that people would bond over, but in a first conversation, you don't want to stay with what you disagree on or finding differences. It's trying to find a way to connect. And so usually those topics might get heated, or it takes the conversation a different way. And you might miss out on friendship even if you have religious differences, or you make different, amounts of money, or you vote for different candidates. So in 2012, which has been many years, I had one of those daily rip away calendars, right? And it was a Happiness Project calendar. And Happiness Project is based on the book by Gretchen Rubin. And so there are a couple of these that I ripped off and kept, and I put in my folders to share with students on particular topics. And one of them from May 9th, 2012 is the Master of Small Talk. And each one is like how to help with happiness. And so lots of tips and tricks. And this one was about how to make small talk. And the 3 strategies that was given on this calendar rip away was number 1, comment on a topic common to both of you at the moment. And so these are some of the things that I just mentioned, like what brings you to this event? And how do you know our host? That's the person hosting the party, right? And it's keeping it positive. Then the second thing is commenting on a topic of general interest, a recent movie, a recent book that's gotten a lot of buzz. And one of the things that the calendar suggested was coming up with some ideas beforehand, like, oh, I just finished this book. Maybe I can ask people about it. Or, this movie just made a lot of money, so I'll talk to people about that, or, Serena Williams just won her 1,000,000th tennis match in the US Open, and so let's talk about Serena, right? And then finally, the tip is to react to what the person says. So they say, do it in the spirit in which the comment was offered. So if they offer a comment, you might give a comment back that's to the same level of positivity in terms of personal information and so on and so forth. But small talk, you can then build into a conversation based on listening and responding to what they're saying. So you're like, wow, that's a lot to begin a conversation, and you would be right. But these things happen very quickly, like showing you're available, and the feed forward can be part of the opening and initiating, and then the small talk is usually what people participate in. And then we go into the second part of a conversation, where you have the chat, right? This is where you're exchanging ideas. This is whatever conversation you're getting into, if you're asking about the book they were reading, or if you have a question during office hours, or if you want to ask them more about who they know at the party, those kinds of things. So this is really the bulk. Once you get into a conversation and you're able to maintain it, conversations can be short, but this is where it becomes not you just started a conversation, but how do you keep it going? So after small talk, people get into what's called the business, and that is whatever the topic might be. So before, when someone was like, I'm having a really bad day, I need to talk, then the business of the conversation would be, let me tell you what happened. First, I woke up at da-da-da, and then they go on. So in the business part of the conversation, you're like, how do I keep the conversation going? And so I was reading this liveabout.com 2017 article called 9 Questions to Start Chats. And some of these, it goes back to the example that I found on the Gottman Institute Facebook page, is just having some different types of questions to keep the conversation going. And some of these can start chats. They can continue conversations. So what do you like to do for fun? Do you have a favorite quote? What is the first thing you would do if you won the lottery, right? So that might be you throw people off, but at the same time, it might be you get more thoughtful information perhaps, and you can start the conversation a different way. How do you handle stress? Do you have any pets? What did you want to do for a living when you were a kid, right? So what's your favorite holiday? All the holidays are coming up. Which one's your favorite? Or, so you can start talking about, like, how do you decorate for Halloween, right? So some of these can start conversation, but they might be able to continue the conversation as well. So on the Get the Friends You Want webpage, Paul Sanders talks about some of the things that you can do in friendship and in conversation. So one of the things might be first starting with something that you agree on. So asking questions, and then once you agree on something, then that's where you continue the conversation. And as you talk about that topic, you can move to a larger context, which might deal with your thoughts and feelings, your opinions about things. And then when there's any commonalities, you point them out to show how much you have in common. So it's like, oh, do you come to field hockey often? No, actually, this is my first game. But I'm really enjoying it, and but I spend a lot of time at the soccer games, and it's like, oh, I go to soccer games too. I haven't really seen you, but I love soccer. Do you follow soccer outside of college? Yeah, I love the English Premier League. Oh, what's your favorite team? Oh, I follow Manchester United. No way. And it's like, I do too. My favorite player for Manchester United. And as you can see, it continues on. So it's finding commonalities and point them out. And then you can go beyond commonalities and what Paul Sanders calls finding the hook points. And the hook points is when you can find something where you can go do it together. So, for example, if you watch soccer, well, in America, not a lot of people might watch the English Premier League, but if you're both really into it and you support the same teams, at some point it might be like, hey, we should totally go watch, the game on Sunday. This place shows the games early, and so we can get like breakfast food and watch soccer. What do you think? So it allows, like, you start with agreement, you move to a larger context, you point out the commonalities until there's something that you can find that you can do together if you're vibing and you seem interested in this person, you want to be friends with them. And so it reminded me of the Big Bang Theory episode called The Friendship Algorithm. And this is where Sheldon tries to find something to do with Kripke, his nemesis in the workplace. And so some of it is like, he thinks, and Sheldon is often like, let's go get a hot beverage. And then it's like trying to find something that they're interested in. And it's finding something that they have in common or that Sheldon finds interesting enough to do with Kripke. And they finally decide to go rock climbing. Like indoor rock climbing. And so it's one of those things, like, they go through a series of things, and because Sheldon is so systematic and specific that he isn't building the conversation naturally to find that they might go do rock climbing together. He's just finding the thing that he finds the least offensive so that he can make friends with Kripke, and it's all because he wants Kripke to allow him to be in the lab and get more hours in the lab. So he might be going about it the wrong way in the sense where he has different intent or different goals. But in general, he has the right ideas, finding something in common. But it should be something that you're interested in, because when he goes around climbing, he doesn't want to do it, and he ends up passing out in the middle of climbing the rock. So that's critical that, allow that to happen organically or naturally. Okay. When you're in there, you have to think about turn taking, and turn taking is like I'm speaking and then you speak, and sometimes interruptions can get in the way of that. But it's something that you want to be sure that you have some balanced time, and that if you're spending a lot of time talking and you notice that, then maybe turning it around on them and giving them a question so that, you want to include people and you don't want to just dominate the conversation, because then you're not going to get to know people and then they'll remember you as the person who dominated conversation, right? And so to build friendships, though, you want to have that equal time, because those relationships are more based on equality than perhaps other relationships. So let's start that out with the conversations. When someone is talking, there's something called back channeling. Back channeling is when you show them verbally and non-verbally that you're listening. And so sometimes people go over the top, and sometimes I think this can become habitual. But in general, it's showing interest when someone's talking and you're like, they're telling you a story and you're like, no way, oh my God, that's amazing. And you nod your head and you're like, any of those sorts of things. Or you're just, making eye contact, you show interest non-verbally, you are, responding to them in certain ways. And you don't want to do so much talking that it's interrupting what they're saying. But I think you get the idea. When you're talking to a friend, you're like, oh, no, yeah, oh my God. And so, yeah, it can get a little out there. But again, if you're just sitting there and you're not doing any nonverbal cues to indicate that you're interested in what they're saying, that you understand what they're saying, that you even want to be talking to them, then they'll probably move on, right? So back channeling is pretty important. And then on the WikiHow, which, breaks down conversations just like we're doing here. And they had a conversation or an article, How to Start a Conversation with New Friends by Paul Cherniak from March 2019. And they do follow the 3 parts of the conversation, which I think is appropriate, so good on them. But I also specifically like this piece of information that Paul suggests in this article. If you've had brief conversations with the people before and you're having a conversation with them now, point out and remember remember and recall previous conversations. So you could be like, the last time we chatted, you told me about your camping trip up north for Labor Day, but I didn't get to hear the rest of that story. Or do you have any camping trips planned for October? Like there's other ways that you can use information in the conversations you've had before to build new conversations with them now. And I think that is really important. Like people, we like to be remembered. We like that people know who we are. And it's not like going on Facebook and going, well, so you went camping up north, and they'll be like, how did you know that? If you did something like that you interact with on Facebook a lot and you're like, hey, I saw those pictures of camping on Facebook. Tell me more about your trip. That's okay as long as that you're friends on Facebook and you interact. You don't want to say that and look like a lurker that just uses social media sites to gather information without actually interacting with people. So just a warning there. So you got to think about the conversation. What was the purpose of the conversation you wanted to have? Was it to talk about the book, talk about field hockey, building the relationship? Think about questions you're going to ask them. Be sure to have that balanced time and to show you're interested. And if you've had a conversation with them before, bring that into this conversation. So then the last part of it is concluding. And this is where we have exit lines and we are looking for closure. And sometimes that can be really difficult. In some cases, we're trying to get out of our conversation, but we can't. And I always say you need to have 3 exit lines like, oh, hey, I was just running in here to get coffee. It was good to see you, though, and I'll text you when I get home, and we'll do something soon, or whatever the case is. That it's sometimes you have to end conversations because it isn't time for that. So typically those exit lines, it's like, it could be something as simple as, I'm really enjoying this conversation, but the entire time we talked, I drank a 32-ounce water. So I'm going to let you go. I'm going to go off, and I will talk to you soon. Or, there's lots of things you can do. Just like, hey, are you going to be here for a while? Because I need to go run an errand, but I was thinking about coming back and doing some reading here at the coffee shop. And so if you are here, then I'll be sure to stop by and say hi. But again, it's like any of those things like asking for closure, like, hey, can we continue this conversation later because I'm about to run to class, or I have a meeting, or I have to go pick up my kids, or whatever it is, and sometimes we use those exit lines even when we're not we don't need to go pick up our kids, but sometimes we do need to get out of conversations. And so it's just one of those things where I always say have 2 or 3 exit strategies that you can always use. Hey, this is a great conversation. I hope we can do it again, but I got to run to class, those sorts of things. Okay. Typically, at the end of the conversation, you can summarize if you want. It's not a formal speech. It's not like the 3 main points I went over today is first. But it is like, I had a great conversation talking about all of your vacationing, and I can't wait to learn more about your next vacation, those sorts of things. Or, I really appreciate you listening to me vent about my bad day. Or thanks for giving me all the information about the book. It's really given me some things to think about and whether or not I'm going to continue reading it. Or, talking with you really made this party a lot of fun. So, thanks for that. And then this is where you want to start to refer to future interactions. Now, this is what happens with adults. Hey, we should get together sometime. Yeah, totally. Okay, bye. And then you just say that. What's the meme say? You just say that to each other until you die. This is where you need to refer to making plans. You need to make those plans and you need to keep them. And so it could be if you're at the field hockey game. Hey, so are you coming to the next field hockey game? Yeah, when is that date again? And you can look on the schedule online, or maybe you have it in your calendar because you don't want to miss a field hockey game. Oh, it's next Thursday at 7. Yeah, I'll plan to be here, so I'll see you here, okay? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. And then someone might go, well, just in case I can't come, here's my cell phone number, something like that. And so that can be where you can exchange contact information. If you're not ready to give people your phone number, you can be like, hey, find me on Facebook, or hey, I think I've seen you on Twitter. I'm going to follow you, and then If I can't make it to the field hockey game, I'll message you on Twitter. Okay, cool. Something just make it naturally part of the conversation. So when are you coming here to the coffee shop to study next? Oh, I don't know. Well, if you ever want a study buddy, here's my number, or here's my Facebook, find me on Facebook. Okay. And sometimes people do that now. Like, oh, I've had such a good time at this party. We should be Facebook friends. Yeah, we totally should. Okay, let's do it now, because I always feel like I have a hard time finding people on Facebook. And then you do it there, you find each other, you add, and then maybe you can start interacting on Facebook and finding other ways to connect. So Paul Sanders, who wrote the article for the Get the Friends You Want webpage, talked about that when you exchange contact information, do it gracefully. Like, you want to make it naturally. That might be something you can practice, or just think about what would be the best way to do that in the conversation. If you're both having a lot of fun, that's what I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun. We need to follow each other on Facebook. Or, it's like, oh, I have pets. Me too. I have an Instagram full of photos. Do you post Instagram photos of your pets? I do. Okay, we definitely need to follow each other on Instagram. Then our pet Instagram accounts can have one more follower, and get in there. And then Paul Sanders also says when you are going to do something or you make plans, that you should follow up within a week at most. So if it's something like, hey, it was great seeing you at the coffee shop last week. And, I wasn't sure when I was going to study again, but I'm going to study this Sunday. So, I'll be there at 10 if you're interested, something like that. But here's the thing. Some things can go wrong in conversations. So again, in that Happiness Project calendar, this is from May 16th, 2012. So May was killing it with some advice. It says 3 unscientific ways to tell if you're boring someone. So that can be one of the things that can go wrong is like, am I boring someone in a conversation? So think about it this way. If no one is asking for clarifications or asking you questions, then they might not be that interested. People who are interested ask for you to elaborate, to clarify, and they ask questions to show that they're engaged. Like, oh, when did that happen? Oh, wait, what do you mean by that? Or those sorts of things, right? The second one might be if you're just talking a lot, they just might not find it interesting to only talk about you, right? That people like to add in their opinions and information and experiences. They might want the conversation to end faster if they're not able to do that according to this calendar rip-out page. And then finally, it's the body position. People with a good connection generally turn fully to face each other. A person who's partially turned away or scanning the crowd might not be fully engaged in the conversation. I do think that when we're at parties and stuff like that, it can be overwhelming. So it might not just be that they're bored. It might just be like there's a lot happening and to take in. But I think body position is a good point. Like, if they're not facing you in any sort of way or responding and doing any sort of back channeling, then that can be a problem in the conversation. And one of the things is you could change what you're doing and you could ask them a question and then see if they turn towards you and ask questions. And if not, you can say, well, it's nice chatting with you. Have a good night, And so one of the things that you might find is that if you're asking people questions, though, you get one-word answers. There could be lots of reasons why you're getting one-word answers, but some of that can be really frustrating. And I'm sure parents who have children coming back from school is like, what'd you have for lunch today? Food. Did you have fun at school today? Yeah. What'd you do? Stuff. Like, hey, do you want to share more? So that can be a signal that they don't want to have a conversation because they're only giving you one-word answers. And so one of the things, though, is, I'll try to have a conversation with someone. I'll ask them 3 different questions, and I take the baseball 3 strikes and you're out rule. And if I ask them 3 questions and they don't elaborate, they don't give me more than one word, and they don't ask me anything, that's when I will say, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to go over here to get some more to drink, or, I really can't see the field hockey game very well from here. I'm going to get closer, or, oh, I see a coworker I know. I'm going to go say hi. Any of those sorts of things can help you get out of that conversation, but it just might be that person is not available for a conversation and we didn't pick up on their nonverbals, right, when we went into that conversation. Because again, to have a conversation, you need to show that willingness. Interruptions can be really problematic, and some people do interrupt because they think what they have to say is more important, or they think that you're talking slowly and they can finish your sentences for you. Interruptions are generally seen as negative, so if that's something you do, you might want to consider why you might interrupt. And if it's just like you're excited, it might just be like, okay, well then, that's great. Show your excitement in listening to them or agreeing with them. And then when they're done talking, then being sure to add in your point. But generally, when people clarify or agree during a conversation as an interruption, it's not seen as negative or as rude as simply interrupting. Okay, here's something else. They don't remember you or you don't remember them. Oh my God, that can be awkward. That can be so awkward. But one of the things is, there's a lot of people to know, and, some people are better at remembering people than others. And one of the things is trying not to take offense to that unless you've met them like 7 different times and they still don't know who you are. It's kind of like, come on, bro, what's the deal? But one of the things might be, oh, hi, I'm Alysa. I believe we met before, but yeah, again, my name's Alysa, something like that where you can just don't let it bother you. Just introduce yourself again and move on. And if you don't remember them, you can be like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Tell me your name again. Oh, yes, it's David. Of course, David. I'm so sorry. And, it's fine and you move on. But that's one of the things that a lot of times people let that fester and impact that conversation. And then the longer you wait, the more awkward it might get. So it might just be like, hey, I'm just going to introduce myself again. I'm Alysa. Or I think I've met all of you, but I'm not sure. I'm Alysa. Hi, everyone. Those kinds of things. And just go from there. Hey, can everyone remind me of their names? There's lots of ways we can do it. And it's just get it in there as quickly as possible and then move on. And then try to remember the names during that conversation, though. Long pauses, one of the things that sometimes when we're talking to people, the turn taking might be a little off, and that can make it problematic to have conversations like a back and forth. So I used to have a professor who had long pauses. And so what I learned was that he would continue about 5 beats after he paused, which is a little bit longer than everyone else. But it's something that I noticed, and after a few times, I would start talking and he would continue, and I would apologize for interrupting, and then I would listen. And so it's one of those things like, okay, that's a harder conversation to have, but it might just be determining what their pace is and then mirroring that or allowing them to finish, giving them a few seconds, and then continuing on or adding in your thought or asking them a question. And then one of the things is how to follow up. So someone might be like, I was really interested in going to see that one movie. And then it's like, okay, were you going to finish it? Do you not remember it? And so one of the things, according to Trent Ham in 2011, in the 20 ways to start a conversation and build into a connection, you can use their last few words to encourage them to continue talking because you're not sure where to go. So it could be, what movie are you interested in? Oh, yes, I really want to see this movie. I can't think of a movie right now. But it's one of those things like, oh, I had a blast at... You had a blast where? And so it's allowing them to pick up where they are and you to help them with that. But those can be some of the things that can make conversations difficult. But again, the more that we do it, the better they become, the easier we can connect with other people. And I think although conversations are something that are important to a whole lot of relationships and situations, that the more you do them in any of those situations, the easier it can become specifically in one context, like creating friendships, having conversations, knowing how to get out of a conversation, knowing how to continue a conversation. All of those things can be helpful. And it's one of those things that typically you're starting these conversations when you have never met the person before or you've known them very briefly. And those can be awkward and those can not last very long or they can build into the best friendships possible. And so one of the things is just keep at it because someone might not be in a mood to have a conversation that day. Maybe they're having a bad day, but they need to be at this workplace function. Maybe they are just done with people for that Monday, it can happen. And some people, we're fabulous, but not everyone picks up on it. And so it's moving on to the next person who may be able to recognize our fabulousness. So if you have any comments, thoughts, or stories about conversations that you've had to start friendships, please let me know either by messaging me on any of the social media sites on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at bestforeverspod, or email me at bestforeverspod bestfriverspod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your experiences, what you think about conversations. And if you try some of these things that I talked about in this episode, let me know how it went, right? Let's hear about this. Let's share that information so we can use it as a way to help people have those better conversations. Because again, the more we do it, the better it comes. So until next time, friends, consider how you can use conversations and ask questions as a way to start new friendships. Because without our friends, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hey Karina, do you want to hear an interesting new fact about sloths?
Impossible, Cassie. I know all there is to know about sloths. They spend their whole lives eating and sleeping, and that's living the dream in my book.
I bet you don't know this fact.
Fine, surprise me.
Sloths are surprisingly fast and skilled swimmers. They can move 3 times faster in water than they ever can on land.
Suddenly, I love them even more. Where can I possibly learn more exciting and interesting facts about sloths?
Well, we did do an entire episode on sloths for Crittercast.
Right! Crittercast, our comedic animal-themed podcast. It's the show where we talk about all kinds of animals and why we love them.
We upload new episodes twice a month on every 2nd and 4th Sunday.
Just in time for your Monday morning commute. You can find Crittercast on iTunes, Spotify, and many other podcast streaming apps.
Plus, check out our website,
crittercastpodcast.com,
for links to all of our social media and for more fun facts and adorable photos of critters big and small.
Crittercast Podcast.